thank you all for tuning in tonight. We're super excited for this event. Before we start, I'd just like to mention that we acknowledge the Monacan Nation as the traditional custodians of this land we're on, and want to take a moment here to respect their elders, past, present, and emerging. So for those of you who might be new to Vitae and new to Second Street Gallery, Second Street is a nonprofit art space just a few doors down from Vitae's new location on Water Street. We're at 115 Second Street Southeast. We are the oldest art space of our kind in Central Virginia, and our mission is to encourage an appreciation of contemporary art and culture by educating the public through exhibitions, lectures, workshops, classes, tours, and publications. So tonight we'll be joined by our exhibiting artist, Theodora Miller, whose solo show Affirmations is on view in person here through the end of the month, February 26th. We're lucky enough to get a special cocktail lesson from Ian Glomski, founder of Vitae Spirits, and a special exhibition tour at the end of the night from Theodora. So Ian's gonna start for around 15 minutes before we launch into the gallery portion of the night. And while each speaker is doing their thing, it might be a good idea for you as a participant to pin their video and watch in full screen so you can see everything that Ian is doing and everything that Theodora is showing you. All right, I'll just introduce everyone quickly before handing over the reins. So Ian Glomski is a former professor of microbiology at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. He's had a profound fascination for over 25 years for microbes and how they sculpt our macroscopic world. An experienced brewer, winemaker, cheesemaker, meat curer, kefir culture, veggie pickler, wild mushroom forager, and infectious disease specialist trained at the Pasteur Institute of Paris, founded by the father of modern fermentation, Louis Pasteur. He is the founder of Vitae Spirits. Kristen Chiaccia is our executive director and chief curator here at Second Street Gallery. Prior to joining Second Street in 2016, Kristen held the position of director at Edward Tyler Nahum Fine Art in New York, where she organized exhibitions of work by Ed Ruscha, Joan Mitchell, Hugh Locke, Andre Serrano, and a number of ABEX masters. She received her BA in the History of Art and Architecture from the University of Pittsburgh, her master's in Modern and Contemporary Art, Critical and Curatorial Studies, and completed a certificate in Appraisal Studies in Fine and Decorative Arts at New York University. Our exhibiting artist, Theodora Miller, is a self-taught artist based in Richmond, Virginia, whose signature elements are textural surfaces, intuitive marks, paint chips, and saturated colors. Theodora's calligraphic designs in this show are an authentic expression of her Greek identity, merging memory, emotion, and history into visual statements that are uniquely her own. So at the end of the night, we'll talk about another upcoming event with Theodora and then display some more links to purchase artwork and visit the gallery. If you're interested during the talk, you can check out virtualssg.org to learn a little bit more. All right, I think we're ready, Ian, to hear more about the cocktail of the night.
Great, thank you very much. Just double checking to make sure you can hear me and everything. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'd really like to just first start off with thanking the Second Street Gallery for inviting me here to do something I really enjoy, and that is talking about cocktails. So really my goal for this little bit of time that they've given us is to kind of teach you a little bit something about making cocktails, so that when Kristen starts leading us through Theodora's work, we'll have a cocktail in hand, ready to go. We can sip along and have an enjoyable evening. So the first thing that's really important in cocktails is quality ingredients. A lot of people kind of see cocktails as a way to mask bad booze or something like that. The truth is that just tastes like some syrup over bad booze. So the idea is really to start off with quality ingredients. The ingredients that we'll be using tonight to make our cocktail, which we've named the Ambrosia Flip, are partly based on Theodora's background as a Greek person coming from Greece. So the spirit that we decided to use for this cocktail is Vitae Spirits anisette. So an anisette is a anise or anise flavored alcohol. The one that's most popular in Greece that is anise flavored is called ouzo, but it's very common throughout the Mediterranean. You'll see it called sambuca in Italy, or anisette or pastis in France. And this is basically Vitae Spirits version of an anise flavored liquor. Another key component of what we'll be using tonight is a locally made blueberry lavender syrup from Crescent Simples. They started up their business here in Charlottesville and have recently moved to Richmond, but they make super high quality syrups, a wide variety of different types of syrups, and we really felt this blueberry lavender brought out the flavor of our anisette. We're also using embitterment bitters. They're orange bitters. Bitters are often used to add balance to a cocktail. If you're kind of aware of kind of food balance and palates and things of that sort, bitters are quite good at offsetting sweet or hot flavors, and that's basically what we need to balance in a cocktail like the one we're making tonight. And then we also have fresh citrus. Whenever you use citrus, it's always best to use fresh squeezes, limes, lemons, oranges, things of that sort. They simply have the best flavor. It's really tough to find citrus that has been pre-squeezed that really has that brightness. And something that I'll be adding tonight, which is a little bit optional, we'll be using egg whites also. I happen to have pasteurized egg whites here, simply kind of for safety reasons, and you can buy it in a pint container like this. But really, you could just crack an egg and use the egg white from an egg also. For those of you that are vegan, there's yet another option. It's called aquafaba, which you can basically take the liquid from your garbanzo beans or other beans that are canned. You take that liquid and you sub that in for the egg white. Because really what we're trying to achieve using egg white or aquafaba, the bean water, it adds a mouthfeel to this whole cocktail. When you shake it, it gets frothy and foamy. It looks pretty, but it has a specific feel in your mouth. So whenever I'm making cocktails, I like to make sure that the glass is cold. Essentially, the colder the better, unless you're making a hot toddy or something like that. So I start off with the glass. As I getting things put together, I put some ice in it, simply so the glass starts cooling down. You will need a shaker for this drink. I happen to have what's called the Boston shaker. That's a two-part shaker where you have, in this case, a pint glass that then can sit in another glass, and you smack it down and it seals it so you can shake it. There's other varieties of shakers that'll get the job done too. You also need some way to measure the ingredients that we're putting in here. Typically, in a bar, that is jiggers. These are little cups essentially that have specific measurements on the side of them, so you can tell precisely what you're doing. You basically just fill it up to the rim and dump it in to measure it. You can get kind of more universal measuring cups like this, where you can look down in it and see the different levels. Either way can do the job. And you also need a strainer. This is basically a way, so after you do the shaking, you shattered a bunch of ice, you get big lumps of ice, and you basically use this to then strain out the ice away from the liquid that you've kind of produced. So hopefully, those of you that plan to drink with us have all these ingredients ready in front of you, as well as the recipe. So I'll start off by simply adding the spirit first. It's 1.5 ounces, so 1.5 ounces. That's the size of this jigger here. And I will put it into our pint glass. One reason why I like these Boston shakers is that we have these two glasses. I can basically put all of our ingredients in here and take my time. A lot of other shakers out there, the cobbler shaker with kind of one piece, you don't have that time because you might have your ice already in there, whereas this allows us to have two separate containers, one for ice and one for our liquids that we are putting together. So I just added 1.5 ounces of the anisette. Next thing I'm going to add is 1 ounce of the Crescent Simples blueberry lavender syrup. Adds a little bit of sweetness to it. Next, we add 1 ounce of lime. Once again, I like to use fresh lime. So I got a little squeezer here. You can use either kind of one of these I don't know, this type of squeezer or a reamer instead. And you squish your limes into a jigger to make sure you have that 1 ounce that you're looking for. When you're developing a cocktail recipe, getting the proportions is very important to maintain this balance that I was talking about, the balance between the heat of the alcohol, the sweetness of the sugars, the syrups, the sourness of the citrus. So you really do want to measure it out. And you can't always rely on one lime equaling a certain amount of alcohol. You want to measure it because limes come, sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're drier. So that then, 1 ounce of lime. Going to put in 5 dashes of the orange bitters. Gives it both fragrance and a little bit of bitter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then a ½ ounce of your egg white or aquafaba to give us the mouthfeel that we're looking for. And then it's time for action. Get ice in your shaker. I put a little bit too much in there, so I'm gonna knock it out a little bit. I'd say you want your shaker to be half full, something close to that. Dump in our mixture, smack it or close it, however your shaker might work. Shake. And this one we're gonna shake a fair amount. We have that egg white in there, and we want to get it frothy. So you shake it quite hard. You can feel the temperature drop to frothing. When you shake a cocktail like this, you're actually aiming to go sub-freezing. When you shake it enough, it actually goes down like 20, 25 degrees, and you can feel your hand sometimes freezing to the side. You whack this so that it frees up your pint glass. You grab your cocktail glass, dump out the cooling ice, put on your strainer, and strain this gorgeous color, blueberry, into your cocktail glass. And I like a little bit of sparkling water in there too to froth it up even more and give us a little bit more mouthfeel. And finally, just for a little aesthetic touch, a garnish. A lot of times people add lime garnishes on the side so that you control that balance I was talking about. If it tastes a little too sweet, you squeeze a little bit of that lime in there to kind of round it out and have that balance that you're looking for. You can see this is a gorgeous cocktail now and is now all ready for Kristen and Theodora. I'm going to taste it to make sure it still tastes exactly how I want it. Ah, exactly what I needed. And with that, I think we may be ready to go on to the next stage.
You could take a
Thank
nap.
you, Ian. That looks amazing. Hopefully my boyfriend will have one waiting for me. He better be watching this and making me a drink as I sit here. So I have one waiting when I get home. Fantastic. So Megan, you might want to be a little closer to Theodora. Yes, yes. And now I will ask you to unmute and pin you. Perfect. Thank you. So Theodora, can you hear me from out in the front of the gallery? Hopefully okay?
Turn her up just a little bit.
Up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Ian, just so you know, after you have, you got to toast it the Greek way too, by saying yamas, which means to our health. So
Yama.
everybody who's drinking at home, make sure you say yamas before you take a sip.
Ah, I'll know for next time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ian. And thank you, Theodora, for joining us today here in the galleries so that we can speak about your work. So if anyone, I'm going to start off with some questions for the artists, but along the way, if anyone else has any other questions, I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions in there and then I'll go ahead and and get to those as, you know, as the talk progresses. So Theodora, I'm super interested in hearing about how you started painting. I know that you went through a traumatic head injury and that painting was a way for you to go through your recovery. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your painting origins, so to speak.
Yes. So as a child, I was very much a child artist, but when I went away to college, I stopped taking any art classes and got into a career and the corporate world and such, and just went very, very far in the opposite direction of art. And then I started getting back into it and taking some different workshops and starting to paint at home just from a hobby perspective. And then in 2014, I had an accident. I fell down the stairs and I hit the back of my head and had a traumatic brain injury. And during that time, it affected my vestibular system. So I had trouble with balance. I was sensitive to light, to sound. I had trouble speaking. My memory was affected. All of my cognitive abilities really took a beating. And I was out of work for months and months and had to go to all kinds of therapies and such. And it just was an extremely difficult time because I had the intelligence to know I wasn't right, but I couldn't express myself. My memory was totally shot. And so it was like I was trapped in this body that wouldn't let me do the things I could normally do. And so having to stay in a dark room and all of that, it just was extremely depressing. And my doctors and my therapists, physical therapists would tell me, well, you know, do other things. You know, I can't read a book because my vision was whacked. I couldn't watch TV or movies or anything like that. And so they said, well, what do you like to do? I like to paint. So I started painting. And the incredible thing was that when I would sit down and I would paint, my symptoms that were never ending would subside. The terrible headaches, the nausea, the forgetfulness. It was like I was able to just focus on what I was doing and get out all of my emotions. And at first what I would do is I was just angry and depressed. And so I literally would smack paint on, and then I would use my palette knives and I would scrape things off. And then I'd kind of just get out all those emotions, and then I'd turn around and come back to it, you know, the next day, and I would take it a little bit further, and then the next day and the next day. And then all of a sudden I would look at the piece and go, oh, wow, look at that. And I could take it forward. So I'd never had dabbled in abstract art, didn't realize at the time that's what I was doing, but it just gave me hope, and it made me feel better physically, that I just started having this big dark cloud start to be lifted, and it would give me purpose. And so even though I was getting stronger and I was feeling better, I just needed to paint because it was like the air that I needed to breathe. And so that's kind of how it all began. And then a year later, I decided to take the leap professionally to do it. And it still really feeds me. My art practice really is my sanctuary. It's where I go to express all my emotions, good or bad. I lose all sense of time. I don't feel hunger. I just am able to be one with the paint and the paintings, and it truly gives me a joy and an inner peace that I've just never felt before.
No, that's an incredible story. And I'm very curious to how your painting may have changed when you were at the beginning of your healing process, and then did you see a transition where were you using different colors? Was it easier to work in certain colors right after the injury than others? I mean, how did you see your work change throughout the healing process?
You know, it's really interesting because I had like a little show of all my concussion paintings. And when I was able to kind of see them all together in one space, it really shocked me how much the color told its own story. It was a very dark time for me, and all of my paintings reflected that. Lots of grays and blacks and fogginess, and also the texture had a very jarred roughness to it. That I really think it was just a complete reflection of how I was feeling internally, and the battle and the tension that I was feeling at the time. I think that as time has evolved and I've been able to get stronger and to kind of grow from that trauma and embrace the imperfections, if you will, that life gives us, it's given me a renewed focus in terms of being grateful for that bad thing that happened to me, and to be able to have a silver lining to it. So I think naturally I'm an upbeat, loud Greek, love color, and so I feel like I'm finally at home. Mm-hmm. And I've circled back to kind of that joy, and I feel like my work today reflects a more optimistic, positive place.
No, absolutely. I mean, I encourage everyone who's able to come in and make an appointment to see the exhibition, because there is no lack of color and joy, and there's just such a vibrancy in these works. But I want to ask you a little something about maybe some of your technique right now, because you did talk about when you were going through this process, some of the, scraping and, some of the more physical aspects of the paint. So I'm really interested in the work behind you. And so maybe Megan, you can move back maybe so we get Theodora closer to the work and more into the light. Yes. So now we can see you and the work. So I'm interested to know, this was the work, your body of work that I became familiar with first when you applied to our teeny tiny Trifecta 1 exhibition. That's now 3, we're going on 4 this next year. So I really love this body of work where you're using these paint chips. And so can you tell us a little about how that evolved and how you're, because I think it's a really interesting and unique process, especially for someone who doesn't create works of art myself. I was like, what is she doing because they're beautiful works, and there's so much texture and color. And so tell us about these.
Thank you. So part of my joy in creating art is that I can be as messy as I want to be, as exploratory and experiment. And so there's no rules, right? As lots of other parts of my life and prior careers, it was all about staying in the lane. And so what I like to do is to first start with palette knives, because it's less precise than a brush. And so I'll start with these handcrafted wood panels. And the reason why I like to work on wood panels is that you can really build up that texture over time. So first I start with gesso, and gesso is kind of like a thick kind of primer. It's white. You can get it in other colors, but I like to deal with white. And I use these big, actually like household painting, what do you call them? Like spatulas of some sort. And I just really with a lot of liberty, just apply it and just kind of let it settle. It's a little hard to see through the screen, but there's all kinds of texture, just even, and the piece there. And so I build it up with gesso, and then I start doing all these intuitive marks and different colors. So underneath all of this is lots of layers of different colors. And so, and then I start to look at it and I start to kind of think of where I want to go with the piece. And then it's the process of taking away. And so that's what I've done here is these are some of the colors that actually were peeking underneath. We've got some great olive greens, and we've got some of this orangey red, kind of pomegranate and some teal, and even some darker green, gold, and gray. And so then I'm using the palette knife to kind of hone in on the composition. And then this one does not have paint chips per se, but what I've etched into it and kind of carved to reveal some of the colors from underneath is the word curayo, and that means courage. And that is a term that, you know, we as Greeks, whenever you're going through something bad or you've suffered a loss of some type, they just say one word, curayo, 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 and that's to give you, you know, strength. And so this is a piece that reminds me of, you know, even when you are faced with something difficult, you got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep climbing your way out of it. And so that's curayo. The piece here on my right, instead of starting with lots of color beneath it, I actually have black and some green that just pops through. And so again, I'm putting in negative white space, and I started with a base, if you will, of the black. And then when I work on, I work mostly in acrylic, and so I use palette paper, and that's where I mix my paints, and it's just a big puddled mess, but they dry and I can never throw them away. And so I'm like, oh, well, what can I do with these? And I literally, it's like playing in a candy store. I peel them off, they break off in whatever way they want to. You can't control them. And then I play with all these little pieces, and I combine them and I overlay them, and I use a matte medium, and the matte medium is what I use to adhere it. And I just keep playing with it, and you can kind of see some are more sheer, and so the black kind of peeks through. And then these pieces, they were just beautiful, almost in they broke off in kind of bigger pieces. But you can see just how the mixture of different colors and the way that my brush strokes would go in it would leave these interesting designs. And so that's a way that I recycle my paint chips and kind of create, again, something beautiful from lots of little broken pieces.
No, that's amazing. And I should mention that all of the work from the exhibition, if you can't make it to 2nd Street in person, we do have everything online. So you can go to our virtualssg.org page and have a look at all of these images online. So when we were talking earlier, you had also mentioned that you had been using this paint chip technique with the Gramata series. And so maybe we can move over there, because I was really struck by this series. I mean, I think, you know, it's indicated by the very prominent placement that I gave it in the exhibition. So can you tell us a bit about the symbols that you're using in this series and how this came together and what you're doing with this work?
Yes, well, I think that with experience comes a point in time where you can really embrace your identity. And for me, when my mother passed away, she immigrated to the USA, and she passed away a number of years ago. And so one of my ways that I kind of cope with that loss is connecting with my heritage and revisiting my heritage in a more meaningful way. And one of the things that I really miss is hearing her voice and hearing Greek words. And so I wanted to, and the Greek alphabet is beautiful from a visual standpoint. And so taking cues from the Greek alphabet and other ancient symbols, I decided I'm going to create my own language. And it's ever evolving, and it's a visual language language, and it doesn't, of course, have any true linguistic meaning. But all of this is inspired by ancient symbols and historic languages, and so this is what I came up with. The gramata itself stands for letters, and most of my paintings have a lot of color all around. So what I do with this is that I really challenge myself to embrace the white space. And so I start with paper and one of my messiest banged up brushes you can imagine, but I love it. I'm not a good brush cleaner, so never take advice from me on that. But because it's this banged up brush, it gives all of these beautiful, intuitive little marks and accidents. And when I do it, I'm doing them like 50 pieces of paper at a time, one after the other, no thinking at all. Just grab my brush, grab my big tub of acrylic black paint, and make marks, and throw that aside and pick up the next paper and do it. And then I keep doing it. And so what I've noticed is that I have these marks that I continue to make, where I combine marks together, like I said, to kind of create this visual language. And then I sit back at a later time and I start playing with all of those colorful paint chips. And how can I create a color story and add more depth and an organic textural feel to these, to give them a little bit more pop and life. So I can show you on this piece here, you can see where the brush just kind of leaves these little marks and splotches, and then streaks as well. And then I'm accentuating it with parts and pieces of paint chips to give it extra depth. And also you can see more pieces of splotchiness there. Little dots and trivets and such. So it's just really important not to overthink it, just to do. And again, that's one of the things I absolutely love about abstract art. Don't overthink it, don't overwork it, just go with the flow and get the motion out.
Yeah. Now, are we seeing some of the same symbols repeated in the large painting next to you? Or have you?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So we're
definitely.
Yeah.
So I also have, like, when I do a lot of sketching for my gramata also. So I have large pieces of paper which will have 15, 20 symbols. They're not in compositional order, they're just sketches. And so when I was working on this piece, I literally had all those pieces of paper put up with painter's tape all the way around my completely blank canvas. Similar to my other works, I first start with gesso, and then I used a parchment color underneath that gives it just a little bit of depth, but doesn't take away from the monochromatic. And I did all of that, and then white paint on top. And then I added my marks, and then I added more white paint around it to kind of envelop it. So yeah, you'll see I do a lot of that kind of has a reminiscent of M, with different curves, and I do different variations of that, as you see, come here and here. There are a few actual Greek letters that are in here. You'll see the P or pi. You'll see the delta over here. You'll see my version of the gamma, and here we have the Vita. We have a backwards alpha, a capital gamma. Oh, and the phi. I love the phi. And then also I have a collection called Connections. And this is a symbol I do over and over again, which is two circles intertwined. And I intertwine them in different ways, and then have the marks that go along with it. So lots of repetition. What I love about this piece is that I feel like it carries a lot of motion and energy, but what I really love is that it's monochromatic, which is kind of different for me because I'm always injecting color, and this was a little more restrained, but I'm digging it.
Yeah, yeah. So I was also curious about the piece further down the wall, because I know you're using a lot of Greek letters and symbolism, and so keeping with the, you know, as someone who's traveled to Greece, I recognize this, and maybe I'm wrong, as Santorini when I saw this piece, but it's stylistically very different than some of the other works in the show. So I'm curious to hear more about this work here.
Yeah, so this particular piece, Santorini, first of all, is my favorite place on earth. And there's something about the light, the way that the sun rises and the sun sets, that is very magical to me. And I wanted to also give a reference to the Greek letter omega, and that's how I interpreted the white houses that are the white stone houses that you see all along the side of the caldera. And so I wanted to kind of incorporate the blues from the ocean and the pinks and the oranges from the sun setting, and just mix them all together, because when you're there, it's almost like a hallucination of where the water ends and it meets the sky. And so for me, I was going for something really, really abstract and blur all the lines.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm probably going to give you whiplash from going back and forth, but while we're on the, you know, the Greek imagery and some of this in your work. So tell us more about the eyes in the exhibition, because that was something I noticed when I was in Greece. You know, you see the eye everywhere. So I was excited to see it in this exhibition as well. So let's move on over.
The eagle eye is probably the most recognized international symbol there is. And the eagle eye is definitely well known in Mediterranean cultures. It may look a little different in different countries and such, but my understanding is that it was developed in 6th century Greece, and that the evil eye is meant to ward off the glare of evil and bestow good luck to the person that carries it. So it's meant to keep away jealousy and to keep away misfortune. And as a child, Greeks are very superstitious. I mean, my mother was very religious and a great Greek Orthodox, but yet, you know, she believed in superstition 100%. And before we would leave the house, we would have a little evil eye into us. So as children, it would be a little gold medallion, and with a blue stone, and we'd have it pinned right here. And I have 3 children. All of them had their evil eye pins. They're, you know, 22 karat, 14 karat from Greece, evil eyes, and they would wear it as protection. And of course, it's just an endearing symbol, and the eyes, of course, are windows into the soul. And so when I started playing around with paint chips, I wanted to make evil eyes, but I wear them all over my body still to this day. And so I started with little ones. And again, I'm building up the texture, I'm building up the background. I'm using a very messy brush to not have really precise lines, to make the initial shape of the eye. And then I start using the paint chips and applying them to get all of these little textures and things. And so when I name them, I actually start naming them after Greek goddesses and Greek names that I love, and so that they can bring good luck to others as well. So then I was like, well, I've been working on these little ones for so long, I'm gonna do something really big. And I think that also, you know, the year 2020 has been so challenging for so many people. And, you know, it tugs at your heartstrings. And so for this particular one, I believe I titled it Love and Protection. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to create this very large eye. And from afar, you know, it looks very simplistic, but the closer you get to it, there's all these little intricate parts and pieces and teeny tiny things and lots of layering. And for me, like, there's so many different people in the world, and we all look so different, but yet as a whole, you know, we are humanity. And I decided to do these rays cascading out with more texture and applied with a palette knife, because I almost want, you know, to want to protect someone comes from a place of love. And so I want this love and protection to go out into the world and be able to touch as many people and help them feel a sense of safety and control in a time where so much is not safe and controllable. So this was a piece that I fought with a lot, and has a lot of layers underneath until I honed in on kind of what I wanted to be able to express with it.
So we have actually a question from the audience that is somewhat related to everything that's going on right now. So Jordan asks, how has the way you draw inspiration for your art changed due to COVID? Or has it changed?
I think it's changed in that I would find time to balance between doing things that were exploratory and actually honing in on things that I needed to do to give me peace. So some of my other more abstract calligraphy pieces were born out of this need to meditate and to calm myself.
So maybe we can spin around and move over. This is a great transition for these pieces. I love these works because here you're using these Greek characters, but then they take on these abstract, you know, I'm seeing these different designs in the work, and they're becoming these abstract works in and of themselves. And it does, I imagine it would feel like someone, you know, a meditation or a mantra or something, sitting there doing this repetitive. So,
Right.
you know, tell us about these.
Right, so, you know, there was so much angst, especially through the spring and the summer. And, you know, when bad things happen, you're like, you start to question, like, how did this happen? How can we be in 2020 and be dealing with things that should have been long solved? And so I would take time to go and research some of the Greek philosophers and the poets, again, trying to connect with my heritage and my ancestors and see what words of wisdom they have for me. And so when I would research them, I have my sketchbook, and I would write some down, and I would write it in the Greek text. And then I would memorize it, and then I would begin to paint it. And much like I remember being a child and going to all of the ancient ruins, when you see the Greek words actually etched in the marble and in the stone, they're usually capital, they're very large and block-like, but there's never any spaces. They're carved in long lines without any spaces or punctuation or anything. So I decided, I was like, that I would kind of give a more modern feel to that and do it all in lowercase with no spaces and such. And so literally I would be reciting these. And as I'm reciting them, I'm painting them. And as it just became this rhythmic meditation, and it would slow my breathing, and it would bring me a sense of calmness, and hours would go by.
Oh, wow.
And I did a lot of them. I did a lot of them on paper. And you'll be able to see in another piece on the other side where I start with handmade deckled edge paper, and I'll paint just a solid block of color underneath. And that takes a lot of time to prepare all those, and it doesn't take much time to think about it. But then I'll come back and then I will get to work, and I can't be interrupted. I do it in complete silence, and I just rhythmically continue and paint it and say it over and over again. And this one in particular was one that I definitely was doing through all of the civil unrest and the social justice protests for George Floyd and such. It really affected me. And I live in the Fan, just a little, just a few blocks away from the monument. And so it was really something that affected my family and me. And so I decided to paint this particular one. It's by a man by the name of Nikos Gatsos. He is deceased. He was a writer and a lyricist and a translator. And the proverb or the poem that he wrote is this. I'll say it in Greek first and then I'll translate for you. Και αν διψάξεις για νερό, θα στύψουμε ένα σύννεφο. And what that means is, and if you thirst for water, we will squeeze a cloud. Oh. And I just thought those words were so meaningful, and that, whatever you're going to go through, I'm going to be there for you, and I'm going to leap through the sky and do the impossible. And so I call it perseverance. And I think that I honed in on that particular value and emotion that so many people are living with right now, or need to focus on. Yeah. And so the other two on the other side are by another Greek writer and philosopher. This particular one is a screen print, and it's one of the first proverbs that I came across, and it's kind of like my mantra, if you will, and I'll recite that as well. Έχεις τα πινέλα, έχεις τα χρώματα, ζωγράφισε το παράδεισο και μπες μέσα. And what that means is, you have the brushes, you have the colors, draw paradise and get in. And it's just a reminder to me that we all can design the lives we want to live. And I just love that one so much. I repeat it often in different colors and different ways. I have it inscribed on a bracelet that I wear every day. And it's just a wonderful reminder to keep doing it, keep taking that leap of faith, and keep painting. And so that's what I do.
No,
and then I seem to have matched this one, so forgive me for that. But this is one that definitely has come through with the pandemic as well, and with all that we're dealing with COVID and the debates on to wear a mask, not wear a mask, and all this craziness. And it's from Socrates, and he said, "Δεν είμαι Αθηναίος ούτε Έλληνας, αλλά πολιτής του κόσμου." And what that means is, I am neither Athenian nor Greek, but a citizen of the world. And isn't that what it's all about? Like, why can't we just get that right? Why can't we get that one right? They knew it, how many thousands of years ago. And I decided to paint it in colors of the earth that we all share. And so I did it with these different greens underneath, and there's lots of texture and shading that you can see when it's up close. And it reminds me so much of the green hills and the mountains of Greece, and the leaves on olive trees. And then the more chartreuse green on top is kind of the newness of that fresh grass and being brand new. And so I really wanted to connect us all to the earth in this way, and hope that we can start to learn to take good care of each other.
So this, leads us into a question Leah has, that, she's asking, do you feel more of a connection in your work to ancient or contemporary Greek culture? And that's an interesting question, because here is an ancient philosopher, but his words still, you know, ring true so much today. But as far as when you're, you know, when you're looking at your work and thinking about your work, are you more connected to more contemporary or to ancient Greek culture?
You know, I think that what I am definitely connected to more of the ancient in terms of the art and the
and I think the pink piece that we haven't seen
Yeah.
yet is a good example. So maybe we can move over and look
Okay,
at, yeah,
absolutely. What
the
I think that
coins.
these are traditions and pieces of culture that have continued to live on. So I feel like everything really is rooted very long ago and has been passed down and passed down and passed down. And so I feel a certain responsibility to continue to pass it down to the generations. But at the same time, I feel like I'm putting my own contemporary spin on it, so that it can be embraced by today's generation and younger people. And having a few younger people myself, I have 3 children, and they better be watching. I have Alexandros, and he lives in LA, and I have Savannah Maria, and she lives in DC, and then Ariana at home. And so they keep me young, and they keep me fresh, and they keep me connected. And so I still draw inspiration from the past, but I'm kind of this kind of connector to more modern contemporary expressions of it so that they can somehow relate to it. So this piece here is actually 64 individual paintings. Each one of these were hand painted and on paper and cut out and affixed to this the back portion here, and that I did with several versions of neon pink. And I'm kind of slurring my words a little bit because as I look at it, the neon pink kind of gives me a little bit of an iridescent kind of feel. And
Yeah.
if you stare at it too much,
it is a bright work. I mean, when it was delivered to the gallery, it was wrapped in this green bubble wrap. And then when I unwrapped it, it was like, wow, that is pink. But it's such a great piece, and it really adds to the whole installation.
Yeah, and the reason why I decided to assemble it in this fashion, I mean, I actually made, I don't know, 150 of these little circles. Again, sitting down just to methodically just get things out of my head. And so each one of these are different symbols and different marks, much like I've repeated in my gramata and my other pieces. But then I started to remember how when you go to the Greek museums, the Byzantine coins are absolutely gorgeous, and they're like little pieces of jewels. I mean, you could just study the ancient coins and the ancient money and those cultures. And the way they would have them in the museums is they would be in a piece of acrylic, and you could walk around the front and the back, and they would just be arranged in this similar fashion. And so I call this one lexicon. Again, my ever-evolving marks and visual language, and kind of reminiscing of how I would see those gorgeous ancient coins in the museums.
No, that's great. Well, as we approach the end of the hour, I want to get to 2 questions that we have up here from our audience. So someone is asking how much planning goes into a typical piece before you put pen to paper, or you just, is it like do you just get started and just go, or are you mapping it out? Are you really planning, or is it more of a stream of conscious type situation?
It depends, and it vacillates between the two. So something like the Greek poems and poetry, I'm researching them, but then when I sit down, I have a very distinct path. The biggest choices I'm making at that point is which proverb I want to use, and what color story. And so those are a little bit more methodical, if you will. But then when it gets to some of the earlier pieces, it really is a go with the flow kind of thing. And it emerges, and sometimes they change quite a bit between what they started out as and what they actually end up as. And there's plenty of times when I cover things up and start again, or go back to paint it all with gesso. And so a lot of it is kind of trial and error, and certain things don't work out, and I stop and start a lot of paintings at different times, and I have lots of unfinished work that I just kind of jump back and forth between until I kind of get into a groove.
Well, that is a good lead into our next question we have from someone who's asking, your abstract works have many layers, you're using all the paint chips and there's many layers. So how do you know when something's done? When do you become satisfied? Do you just have to stop, or are you, is it a situation where you could just keep working on it forever unless you say, okay, I'm done, this is it, finito?
Yeah, I think if you ask any artist, knowing when to stop is probably the most valuable lesson. And gosh, I know when I should have stopped earlier, I can tell you that much. There are plenty ones where I'm like, gosh, darn it, why did I do that? And I usually do take process pictures, because I might overwork one and be like, I loved it at this point, why didn't I stop? And then I'll try to get back to that place of where I was. I feel a lot of tension with certain pieces. And I will say the large black and white piece, I made it, and then as I was letting it dry, I was playing with this piece of pottery. And the pottery has color and the paint chips on it. And I loved how much it turned out, that I was like, I should make the big one to look like that. And I think for 3 days in a row, I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna throw color on the big one. And then I would be like, no, but I love it the way it is. And so I really tortured myself for 3 days and finally just said, no, I'm not. I'm gonna just leave it. I'm not gonna overdo it. And I'm really, really glad that I stopped. That doesn't mean that I won't try to make another one and test out the waters and add some color. But I think that, it's trial and error and mistakes. You learn from mistakes, and you can always make another one.
No, absolutely. Well, as we approach our 7 p.m. hour, someone has said, and I agree with the statement, that your journey is so inspiring. And do you have any advice for any emerging artists who are looking to take the leap and start a business, or what advice do you have for young emerging artists? I'm going to
do it. Figure out what is uniquely you. Figure out your voice. It's taken me, 6-7 years to do the work that I think is truly uniquely my own. And that you can only get to that place if you are constantly exploring without any pressure put on yourself for it to be perfect. I think when you are just exploring and don't put that pressure of a finished piece, and work on as many pieces as you can, I feel like that will help you hone in on what really speaks to your heart and gets you excited to do the work. So just spend the time making the work, take a leap of faith, trust your intuition, trust your gut, and go for it.
And apply to teeny tiny trifecta.
It doesn't matter if you're classically trained or not. Whatever you put your heart into, it'll show.
No, absolutely. Well, this has been so fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time to drive to Charlottesville so that you can be in the gallery with your work. And I encourage everyone over these next couple of weeks to come into the gallery, make an appointment, come in and have a safe, socially distanced appointment to see the show. You can also browse everything online. This is a link if you're interested in I just lost it, purchasing artwork on our virtual SSG website. We also have another event coming up with Theodora. Next week, we have our Create and Critique series. So the first session is Wednesday of next week at 4 p.m. I don't know if you're able to see. Okay, maybe now you can see it on the screen. So it's 2 sessions, and Theodora will be talking more about her work, and there's a creative element to this, to the workshop as well, which is, you know, always optional. You can always, you know, just tune in to watch and hear the artist talk. So, and here's a couple more links. How long is Theodora in the gallery? So she is that's a good question. What is the last day of the show?
February 26th.
February 26th. Thank you, Megan. What would I do without Megan? We are going to be open. We're generally open Thursday through Saturdays, but we've just decided to add the next 2 Wednesdays on the calendar as well. I know the weather this week was a little, you know, not so nice, and people may have stayed home because of the snow. So we're actually open Wednesday through Saturday now from now until the end of the exhibition. So do come in and see the work in person. And thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you Vitae and Ian, and thank you. That's all for me. Thank you everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.